Fine, as we've done quarterly, and people have seemed to appreciate the idea of let's come together, talk about where we're at, what we're doing, what the future is. And that's our goal as we go through this. Here's our basic agenda for this morning of what the kind of the basic areas we're going to cover, just to do a celebration of where we've been the last 3 months, to get some updates from ministry team, financial, our land and building situation, where that's at. Then we've got a couple of proposals to do, that these boards are not just meeting to meet, but we're actually bringing some things forward, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more, about membership. And people have been asking about what is membership at Prairie Bible Church, and we're going to talk about that this morning, what the admin board has put together, as well as some belief on baptism and our proposals for there moving forward. Those sheets are in the back. If you didn't get a sheet, maybe raise your hand. Lisa will give you a sheet. Everybody get a sheet? I guess we're good. Awesome. So that's the stuff we're going to try to cover as we get started in this. We've got closing prayer on there, but as we go, I think it never hurts to say more prayer than not, right? So if you would just join me in a quick prayer as we get started into our meeting this morning. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you again for the chance to come together and worship this morning. Thank you for our worship service that just ended, the joy in the song, the wonderful message, and just the fact that you're here with us. As we have prayed about this morning, we pray that you will continue to guide our discussion through our business here, that this not be about what we want, or about what we think we should have, but about the direction for your church, where you are guiding us, where you want us to be today, tomorrow, and many years to come, that we can be a light for you here in our community. We ask that we can have great discussion, great purpose, and we can continue to share this with those that aren't with us here this morning. We ask all this in Jesus Christ's name. Amen. So, simple things, as we talk about just for where we've been the last 3 months or so, kind of kicking back to where we were at Christmas. And the kids kind of started us off Christmas time with the youth group, celebrating Christmas and creating those Christmas boxes that then they prayed over and shipped out around the world to kind of celebrate Christmas and remember what we're doing. And it was awesome to see them pulling that together. So then we as the adults kind of had to take their example and say, okay, we better do the same kind of thing. And if you remember, we had the angel tree and some of the gifts that we were able to put together and distribute here in our community and celebrate the Christmas. And then our Christmas Eve service, and I think it's just awesome. I remember that. I kind of almost forgotten about it, but I was flipping through the pictures and the great display we had and the setting we had over in the gym for Christmas Eve. And as I mentioned earlier this morning, we had about 225 people that worshiped with us, and the awesome ambiance and evening and feel and just a great scenario there. And I keep reminding myself of that, but we had 220 people for Christmas Eve. We were 14 months old as a church. We had 220 people here. I mean, that's a great celebration. We got to remember how awesome that really was, and that really was a celebration for many people in the community. As we look forward, a couple of things we've done here in 2019 through our faith as a church and what's going on. As I've mentioned earlier, we hired a permanent worship leader who's going to get started. Jesse's starting May. It's the first Sunday in May, whatever that Sunday is. And his wife, Stacia, and their 2 kids. We're really excited about that. I'm assuming Keith and Estelle have left us. If you remember, I wanted to share it, but I didn't want to share it with them. We're going to kind of try to surprise them a little bit, recognizing them next week. And they are going to be here for 2 more weeks, next Sunday and then Easter Sunday. But with Easter Sunday and a lot of that's going on, we're going to take a short time to recognize and thank Keith and Estelle next Sunday. With that, we're going to recognize them up here, see if we can get them to blush a little bit and embarrass them, right? But the other thing we want to do is if anybody wants to make them a card, to give them a personal note, to provide them a little bit of cash, thank you, anything like that, whether it be financial or notes, if you put that today in the Miracle Barn, or you leave that there, or you get that to us this week, or even when you first come in next Sunday, and hand those cards to me or Craig, or we'll put them in the barn or something right at the beginning of service, and we're going to recognize them. And so anything you want to do there, that's great. If we forget, we can obviously get them a card in 3 weeks and in 4 weeks, and so don't feel like it has to be, but we want to make sure that we kind of spread the word. We want to thank them and recognize them for all that they've done for us, and then the awesome new experiences we're moving forward, looking to the future there. So that's to celebrate them. We want to do that next week. Then a reminder, as we kind of look back over the last 3 months, is March 10th. We all gathered here right after service, about a month ago or so, and said, what's our future? And I'll admit, Craig and Mark and I talked about it, said, okay, we better look at this, and what are we going to do, and how many people are going to be willing to spend another 2 or 3 hours talking about it? And we had over 60 people here. Had pizza, had a great time, great discussion, and we're kind of moving forward on that. And We're going to talk about today the building committee formation and coming out of that vision of where we go now and those next steps. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, but I just think it was awesome to see how many people were here and doing that. The other thing I want to mention, and we may mention this periodically even through service, but just how we've continued to focus on, though it's easy to look at the numbers and the finances and the potential building and everything else, but just prayer is continuing to grow here through some prayer ministry. Some of you that maybe are here and helping set up, there's a lot of people that rotate in and out, but now a little before 9 o'clock every Sunday, anybody that's here and can will just gather for a short prayer time over our worship service to pray about where the next Sunday is going. That's just started here in the last few weeks. But again, it's just one more thing that's growing in our church, and it's not just about the numbers and the finance at all, but it is about the ministry too. And that's, I think, really awesome. We want to make sure we're sharing. And ultimately, and this is an old picture, but just about the people, and that's what's really been cool, is to continue to see the people growing and the new people and the support that we have for each other and where we're at. That's kind of a quick and dirty celebration. We've got a lot of things we want to cover, but any other questions or comments about the last 3 months and just kind of excitement that's been going on? Mark, are you next? Tina. Tina's up. Share ministry. You have to hold it close.
I'm not going to hold it close.
Love the mic. Do you need this?
I'll let Ryan.
There you go.
Okay, so the names up on the board are the members of the ministry team, and we get together once a month, as you know, just to try to discern where God wants Prairie Bible to go as a ministry. Next slide. Just again, like Tom was saying, we like to go back and recap where we've been. And last year, being the first year for Prairie Bible, we did some remarkable things. We decided as a church that we were going to tithe 10% of all of our giving to Christian causes. And I don't have them all listed up there. I do have a listing if you'd like to see it. But I think we are doing a lot of work for God in terms of locally in eastern Iowa. We gave 92% of our giving to different causes here in eastern Iowa, whether it was for homeless meals, homeless shelters, Christian music, camps, scholarships for kids, just different areas where we could help be the hands and feet for Jesus. Then we gave an additional 8% went to international causes. So you can say we did a global ministry, but much of our focus was here locally. Next slide. So in 2019, what is the ministry board focusing on? The Lenten study, as we've been talking about, and tied into Craig's sermons each week. Just walk across the room, and how easy that can be to introduce other people to Jesus. And we're in the middle of preparing for Holy Week, a great time to invite your friends to join in and get to know Jesus. We'll hopefully have the postcards here next week that we can give to our neighbors so that we can use that as an invitation, a way to bring them to Prairie Bible. And as Tom mentioned, Jesse will be joining us early May, and we're looking forward to see what Jesse and God will be doing to help us expand, hopefully reach out to more people in this neighborhood, possibly to the Kirkwood students, and just help Prairie Bible become all that we can be. Again, just to emphasize the prayer ministry. Last week, maybe it's been 2 weeks ago, we had our ministry meeting and we did a brainstorming for 35 or 40 minutes just on what is prayer and does it have to be complicated? No, it does not have to be complicated. As we discussed, prayer can be worship, prayer can be listening for God, prayer can be when we're alone, prayer can be when we're praying out loud to support each other, to support our families. Prayer can be silent. Prayer can also be something just between you and God, or it can be between you and your family out loud. But the one thing that we discern through that discussion is prayer doesn't have to be complicated. And I know Craig's going to have a sermon series on that coming up later this year, and we'll learn more about it. But what we want it to be is simple and authentic and about Jesus. So for the rest of this year, we're going to continue to give a tithe to missions. And so far this year, we've given $2,000 to 2 different homeless shelters, one in Iowa City and one in Cedar Rapids. We also have given $1,500 to the flood recovery efforts in western Iowa and in Nebraska. If you've got other ideas, speak to any of us on the ministry board or to Craig. Let us know what you'd like to see your tithe go to. I think we're doing a good job of reaching people that are in need, who need that extra lift, but I'm sure that there's other ministries that we don't know about yet. So please share that. And one thing I did want to mention, going back to prayer for a minute, I guess I'm here because Cheryl Lehman cannot be up here this morning, and just want you to know that she has been expressing over and over again just how much she appreciates the prayers that you've given for Chloe. And know that Chloe is a miracle. The doctors did not expect her to live, but she has lived, and she hopes to get out of the hospital this week. So those prayers are working, and also know that Rick Ridgway definitely appreciates your prayers, that he's seeing God's hand through your prayers. So next slide, and I'll wrap this up. We've got some ambitions for this year, and that is that we get out of the building and go out and serve. Now, not everyone can do this. Not everyone has to go to every mission trip we go on or effort that we take on. But we are going to go to the shelter house next week on the 18th to learn more about how we individually or as a team can help support that homeless shelter. We had a group that worked with the Matthew 25 Transform Week last year, and we'll be taking that on again in June. So if anyone wants to get involved in that, talk to me, talk to anyone on the ministry board. We're going to have some information out about that you can pick up at the back of the church in a couple weeks. That'll be the end of June. We're also starting some work with the Ronald McDonald House, preparing meals there. Jolene's team did some of that a couple weeks ago. And for those who've got big dreams, there's big needs, like the flood recovery in Nebraska. So that's just a dream, but if anyone's interested in that, there are ministries that are already prepared, know how to do this, and at work, like Samaritan's Purse. So if anyone's interested in that, talk to us on the ministry board. And another big dream we have is maybe next year, maybe later this year, but maybe we can take a day off from physically coming to church, and we just go out into the community and see what we can do to serve God and our neighbors here in the community. And that wraps it up for the ministry board.
Well, I just want to say what a great job I think the ministry team's doing. They really have focused on that area of compassion and helping out in the community. And I think the structure we set up when we first started with the ministry board and the admin board has worked out extremely well. So these are your members of your administrative board. So I get to do the business part, which I'm better at, and the people that are more into the ministry, that's working out extremely well. So here's our weekly attendance, and I guess just this first comment is if you look at the tough, long winter we've had, it's pretty amazing that our attendance has been there. There's probably some Sundays we should have called off church. Some of us probably shouldn't have driven. I don't know if Ellen's here. I know one morning I couldn't believe that she drove in because it was icy, but even through that, we're still averaging about 108, and you can see for the green line that our trend continues to go up. One of the things we're doing within the admin board is we've been talking about kind of what our outreach strategy is, and a part of that is, how do we reach unchurched in the area? So Pastor Craig put together what I think is just an awesome postcard here. And this coming week, there'll be about 5,000 cards getting mailed out to the area. It's probably hard to see, but in the upper right-hand corner there is a little map, and the kind of purple shading is who will receive that. So essentially every household in that area will receive one of these postcards. it basically goes from south of 30 and then includes Ely, Shueyville, Swisher, and kind of that whole area on the south side of Cedar Rapids. So this will be going out. The thing I thought was cool about the design too, remember about a year ago we had an offsite out at Camp Iowa Desica, and one of the terms that came up is our church trying to reach the disillusioned Christian, people that maybe at one time in their life were Christians but got turned off by politics of church or something that happened, and so they've basically not been church attenders and kind of fallen away a little bit, and I think this card directly speaks to that. So next Sunday we should have cards in the back, and we really encourage you to take several of those cards and use it as your simple just walk across the room strategy. Just simply hand that card to somebody that you know and invite them to church on Easter. All right, so back to the business part here. This is average weekly general fund giving, and again, this is just the general fund, so this does not include the capital campaign. And so you can see again with the blue line that we're a nice upward trend, and over the last 12 months we're averaging almost $4,000 a week in average giving. So here's a busier slide, and this is one that we kind of show, and it just gives you a good snapshot of really the financial condition of where we're at. So if you look, the top green line is our checking account. So again, this is general fund only. This is not the capital campaign. So you can see this is the 15 months, but you can see in September we made voted within the congregation that we'd move some money over to start up our building campaign. So that's where you see that green line drop down. But ever since then, our checking account has continued to increase. The blue line there is what the general fund giving is by month, and then the red line is where our expenses have been. So in general, we're keeping our expenses below our giving, which is what you want to do, and our checking account continues to grow. So I should stop there. Has anybody got any questions on that? I've also got some of the QuickBooks information in the back of the room that's actually the full profit and loss statement as well as the balance sheet if you want to understand a little bit more about that. But is there any quick questions in there? I don't want to go too fast here. All right. Randy wasn't able to be here. He's down in sunny, let's see, where is it? Yeah, somewhere warm. And so this is, Randy's been leading our capital campaign fund. And if you remember, we started this beginning of last fall. And we set out just, kind of pie in the sky at that time and said, well, let's set a $500,000 goal. Well, we've almost reached that. We're only $23,000 away from our goal. So there's a lot of information on here, but if you just look at the blue boxes, you can see our campaign total to date is $467,500, and then today we have actually got cash in hand for the capital campaign of almost $250,000. All right, so here's the land update. So last time we came and talked with you a little bit about the land, we had 6 different sites that we were looking at. Since then, the Land Search Committee has pretty much narrowed it down to these 3. And I'm sure the map's almost impossible to read, but just to give you some reference, clear on the left side of the map is 380. Clear on the top edge of the map is Highway 30. And then if you see the kind of the reddish one with the letter P in it, that's Prairie Hill, so that's right here. So the bottom of the map is south. So if you just go south down Kirkwood from here, there's something that's marked with a G, and we're just calling that the Jardine property. And so that's some acreage there that's for sale. And so that's one spot that we're looking at. You'll kind of see in the next slide, I've got some information, but if you can kind of see where that G's at, just right on the north edge of that is there's some housing there, some condos and apartments. And on the south of it, kind of the rest of that property will be commercial. Then the other area that we're continuing to look at is marked with K, and that's a Kravonic farm. So if you go south down Kirkwood until you hit the T, there's kind of that abandoned house there. That's the big 134 acres they're planning to do a development in. So that's the other spot that we're looking at. And then over towards the right, I've got 2 boxes that are kind of yellow. They're marked with S. And so that's the Serpasek farm. And those are 2 potential spots. So I'll talk about those here in the next slide a little bit. Before I go on, everybody kind of got straight where those spots are at? That makes sense? I mean, part of the reason we're staying within this area, we've looked within from the school right here, there essentially isn't any churches within about a 5-mile radius. So we're definitely in an underserved area, which is one of the things we'd originally said we wanted to be, as well as close to Kirkwood. So kind of the light blue box up there with the KC is Kirkwood College. So we're very close there. So there's a lot of information on this. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to read it in the back, but let me just highlight a couple things. So this is basically just a matrix that lays out the 3 sites we're looking at. So, and these are some of the factors we've looked at. The top row there is just kind of the location, which I just kind of talked about, and kind of the distance from either 30 or 380. So all 3 of these sites are close to a major road. We've got the neighborhood. Obviously, the one in Jardine property is more commercial as well as housing. The one in the Servicec is, depending on which site we go to, it's either surrounded by farms totally, or the one that's kind of on the south side, there's a future power substation that would go in. So that would be, if we chose that lot, that would be one of our neighbors, if you will. And then obviously the Kavonic farm is the one that's the housing development. We've looked at traffic counts, so we've got information there in terms of what the traffic counts are on each one of them. City limits, so they're within city limits except for the Servicec farm, so it's basically across the road from city limits. What that means is we know that we could bring water over to that site if we were at the chosen Servicec farm, but we'd have to put in our own septic system. So those are just trade-offs we've got from a dollar standpoint. And that kind of goes to the utilities, the cost per acre you can kind of see up there. And again, these are non-negotiated prices. So, what we're doing right now is we're staying in contact with all 3 of these. And we've said, hey, if there's interest on it, let us know. But right now, we're not feeling like it's exactly the timing, or we don't feel like we have to make the decision today to go ahead and purchase it. We'd prefer to wait until we've got some information back from our architects and from our civil engineers so we can factor that into which is the right site to go to, as well as being a good steward of the money. There's no advantage for us to have land, sitting vacant if we're not ready to move forward on it. But again, we're staying in touch with all these people so we make sure that that we don't miss out on one of these properties, if you will. So they'll let us know if there's any other interest on it so that we can make appropriate action. So any questions on that? There's a lot of information up there. I don't know if you can see it clear. Ron, can you see that all the way there in the back? Good. I tried to make it small enough so you couldn't read it all in the back. That's why you're supposed to be up front. But I actually didn't run copies of this, but if you want it, you can. Now, obviously, when we get to the point where we're ready to move forward on land, we'll go through it in a lot more detail and we'll bring it to a congregational vote. But this is just kind of give you a snapshot of where we're at today. Any other questions? Ryan's pointing at somebody. Yeah, so Nick's asking about the Kavonic land. Yeah, so here's the situation with the... Nick wonders if they got gold down in the Kavonic land. Maybe they do. Here's kind of the situation on that. It's just at the very starting phase of it. So the developer actually doesn't own the land yet. He hasn't closed on it. I'm not sure what the closing date will even be yet. It has been annexed by the city, but it hasn't been rezoned yet. So he's still working through a lot of the financial pieces of it to make it a full package. And so, again, these are non-negotiated. We haven't really approached it. Now, we do know, though, that there's some land like over on 965, close to the airport, that we're aware of that recently sold for $125,000 an acre. So it's not that that's totally out of line. It's just a lot more expensive than some of the other sites we're looking at. So, but good question. Any other questions? All right. Yes, that's a great question. Is it considered a developed price? And yes, it is. That would bring sewer and water to us. It would have an access road. We'd clearly have to put in our own parking lot and stuff, but everything, dirt work and everything would be done. So that's an excellent point. And that's actually another reason why, before we make a final decision on it, we'd like it to get a civil engineer to look at 2 or maybe even all 3 of the sites to let us know what the all-in cost would be. Also, in terms of a lot of the discussions we've had, a lot of the reading we've done on building and architects, the architects really like to be able to, essentially design to the land. And so if we have land, haven't made a choice, there may be some inputs the architect could give us on as, hey, this would suit this style better or not. So that just gives us some more flexibility at this point. Other questions? All right. So the building project, we talked about March 10th, we kind of kicked off did our vision meeting on 310, and as Tom said, we had 60 people here, some just great inputs, and so we basically took that input, and we kind of started talking about, well, how do we set some teams up? So what we've done to date is we formed a building steering committee, and effectively what we decided is it needed to be small, because this is kind of the decision-making team, if you will. And so that's the members of the team, Linda, Phil, Tom, Eric, and myself. And we've met a couple times so far. We plan to meet at least a couple times a month as we kind of move forward. One of the things we're doing is that building team is we're interviewing churches. So we've identified 5 local churches that have done recent building projects. And we've set up a set of questions and asking them, what approach did you use, what worked for you, what didn't work for you, and we're doing those interviews and we'll be compiling that information. We've gone back through and reviewed the inputs from the vision committee, and right now we're just beginning to kind of work on the needs and priorities based on, the information that we've seen out of the vision committee as well as some other inputs. So. We also spent a fair amount of time talking about what's the right building team structure. So again, the steering team is 5 people, and everything, a lot of churches, even like Grace, is doing a major $16 million program down in North Liberty. They're basically rebuilding their campus. They've got 4 people on their building team, that's all. And we heard that from a lot of people who want to have a small team that's highly dedicated so you can make quick decisions, because that's a key part as you go through this. But as a startup church, we really felt we were a little different in that, there's a lot of ownership this church has in terms of, this next major step forward. So what we have talked through is putting together what we're calling a building review team. And so we've had a number of people that have already volunteered and said, hey, I want to be on the building team. And so what we're kind of envisioning this to be is, a larger team, 10 to 15 people, and really set up just as kind of being the sounding board for the steering committee. So they won't be meeting, this twice a month or more. They'll be once or twice a month. Basically, when the steering committee has some, definitive information that they want to get inputs and feedback back off of, that's what the steering, this review team will be. And then we're also talking about setting up task committees. And so effectively, this won't necessarily start immediately and when the building's done, it'll be done at different points in time. And this is just a sample of some different committees. I will say the prayer team is something we felt needed to start early and go through the duration. So Ron Bunch is actually heading up the prayer team. And if you're interested in being part of that, just let him know. And he's got some specific plans already put together in terms of how that'll work. And so that's exciting. The fundraising team, obviously Randy Rumry will be heading that up, and we're kind of going to work through getting some ideas of how much total project cost will be, and then we'll be kicking off that piece of the next phase of fundraising, interior design, hospitality, youth nursery. There's a lot of different teams on here that will basically just stand up when we're ready for that phase of it. And then they'll basically be reporting into the steering committee to make the decisions, but they'll be providing all the input. So before I go further, does that make sense? Thoughts, feedback? Because we're new at this. We're obviously trying to get as much feedback from other churches in terms of what they've seen work. But this review board is something unique. We haven't seen anybody else do it this way. But we just felt it was important that we're getting feedback from as many people as possible. Yeah, Craig.
One of the teams that I've just been rolling around in my head, so I haven't even shared this with Mark, but that for some of you guys to be thinking and praying about, I think it would be cool if we had a what we call a sweat equity team. So a group of people that have specific skills when it comes time, when we get to a place where we can build and it's things that we can do for ourselves, to have have a team that can coordinate those different skills that people have and get people involved that way too.
Yep, that's a great example. So that's just kind of, like I say, at the starting phase, we know the prayer team, the fundraising team are two that we have to have relatively early on, but yeah, as we get further into it, we thought maybe we'll want to do some landscaping, and we know we're pretty short on anybody that knows anything about landscaping, so we'll set that up, kind of go from there. So what's the next steps of the building team? We've actually got a meeting this Thursday night, and we'll be doing our first pass on the needs priorities matrix. And again, this is the kind of inputs you need when you start meeting with, the architects. We'll go through inputs from our area churches, so we should have those completed this week also. Review findings with the building review team, so that's kind of the first time we'll kind of get together with them and say, hey, here's where we're at, here's what our findings were, and our ideas on the needs. Then we'll actually put out a request for proposal. So this is basically, we'll select a number of architecture firms, whether that's 4 or 6, we'll have to decide exactly how many architecture firms. But then we'll put out essentially information and say, hey, are you interested in this type of church? What's your experience? Likely we'll have them come in and do a presentation to us, but we haven't really got all those details nailed down yet. We'll do the same thing with civil engineering firms, so we'll put out an RFP. I mean, our approach here obviously is we want to ensure that we're handling this from a business standpoint, so we've got multiple vendors, multiple bids, multiple people we're talking with, so it's not, Mark's cousin who's an architect that I want to bring in. It should really be something that we're approaching from a business standpoint. And I don't have a cousin that's an architect, just in case you're wondering. And then go through that interviewing process, do the selection of the civil engineer and architect, and then from that, we believe that should bring us to the point where we've got some high-level concept drawings and some rough idea of costs. And so then we can kind of pull it all together and understand, how many dollars this is going to be, and we'll have some ideas, and then we can bring it back to the congregation and let you know then also what that looks like. And that'll give us an idea of fundraising. We're working through what we think our fundraising capability is as a church, but obviously once we've got that vision in front of us and some specifics, that will help out. So I think that was actually all mine. Other questions? Comments, criticisms? We accept everything. Tom will come up and answer any hard questions you have. Either they want to go home or we did such a great job putting this together, there's no questions. So, all right. We'll move on, and Craig's going to talk us through the next phase. I should ask before we get started, does everybody have a copy of the membership baptism? It's on the same sheet, and of the forms. If you don't, raise your hand and I'll grab you a copy.
As we're getting any sheets that need to be handed out, I'll give you just a little bit of history. Every quarter at Administrative Board, we have what's called OKRs, which are objectives and key results. So we try to identify 2, 3, 4 maybe objectives that we want to accomplish during that quarter, and then what the key results are to say, hey, we've accomplished it. Okay. So 2 of the OKRs, objectives, key results, that we had for this quarter were to develop a membership and baptism standards, I guess you could say. I don't know if that's the right word, and that's what we're coming to you today with. This really isn't a proposal. This is what was passed at Administrative Board, but we want you to hear it. We want you to know that both the membership as well as the baptism, we see this as living, and we'll receive whatever input and all, but the decision-making process actually happened at Administrative Board. So what I wanted to do today is just share with you a little bit about where we came down for our membership and for baptism, and they go hand in hand, by the way. You should have, as part of your packets, a more detailed description of what our criteria are going to be. Obviously, if someone wants to accept Jesus as their Lord and Savior, that's an essential part of membership. But I do want you to know also that what I believe, I should speak for myself, but I want to say this to you specifically. because when someone comes to worship with us at Prairie Bible Church, in my mind, you're already family. There's nothing that you need to do or anything. If you're family, which says to me this. You see, a lot of times people join churches because of whatever benefits they think those joining would be. Like I want to have my baby baptized, or I want to have my daughter wants to get married here, or something like that. What I want you all to know, what I want anybody to know that is a part of the family of Prairie Bible Church, all those things that you might perceive as a blessing or as a benefit of being a part of this church family, you already got it. You don't have to do anything. There's no other expectations. You are part of our family, and that's the expectations. But membership requires us, we individually, to think more deeply about what that means. And that's what these criteria are really all about. And the only one that will be making the determination regarding these criteria, by the way, is you and Jesus. So you get to make those decisions. No one's going to sit down and say, well, you haven't done this, and this. Nobody does. That's between you and the Lord, and you get to decide whether these apply to you or not, okay? Accepting Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, obviously, is the foundation of church membership. Have you been baptized? I'm going to talk more fully about that in just a moment, about where we came with regards to baptism as far as our standards for baptism. But that's one of the things that we would ask the question, have you been baptized? Agreement with core beliefs. We're going to talk a little bit about that later on as well. If you don't know what the core beliefs or what the theology of Prairie Bible Church is, you need to know and say, yeah, I understand it and I agree with that's who we are as a church. Regular worship attendance, commitment to personal devotional time, whatever that looks like for you. You need to be growing in faith, and a commitment to tithe. Again, nobody or working towards a tithe. Now, some people would say, well, what does that mean? How do you define that? No, we're not getting into the weeds with all that stuff. We're not going to say that you have to only tithe or give to Prairie Bible Church or anything like that. What we're saying is that realize that that's part of your walk of faith, and that because you believe in the vision and the mission of Prairie Bible Church, you'd want to give and support to that. But tithing, the biblical mandate of tithing, is something that you want to be aspiring to. That's your heart's desire. Now, that may be a journey, obviously, for some people, but that's those are the criteria that we have for church membership. And there's more to it than all of that. And as I said, we've outlined it in a little more detail in the pieces that we have. But for the most part, that's it. So what are the steps towards membership? And what you need to hear is that this is what's going to be going forward. It's not necessarily for you, and I'll be getting into the next steps for you in just a minute. But just in general, this is what the steps are towards membership. First thing that we would do, you become part of the family. I mean, you start attending and you're going, hey, I'd like to know more about this. We have what's called Discover Prairie Bible Church, and we do those every 2-3 months maybe at Kava House. It's just a chance to get to know Lisa and I, ask questions, understand what the core beliefs are of our church. Membership application. This is really not, I think that's a wrong word, the way to put it. It's really more an information form, and you should have received one of those in the packet that you got today. It's just information that we're looking for, so that you will be communicated to all the things that are going on. So if you have something going on in your family, we can support you in prayer, that kind of stuff. So there's a information form that we'd like you to fill out. We'd like everybody to fill out, whether you actually pursue membership or not. We will have some form of a membership class. What does that look like? We're not exactly sure what that's going to look like at this particular point. It could be just a meeting with me personally. It depends on how many people there are, making sure, again, that you know what our core values are and what our theologies are. Your commitment to Prairie Bible Church, personal commitment to Prairie Bible Church, being a part of worship on a regular basis. So those are kind of the steps. Once you've went through those things, then you would make the decision, is this something that God's calling me to? And this is what I want you to hear specifically. Membership should be a calling. Is this what God is calling me to do? In this particular time and with these particular people? And again, no one can make that decision but you and Jesus. So be praying about it. Is that what God wants me to do? Now, we're going to assume that a lot of you want to be a part of that. But before I get to that, I don't want to get past baptism. I want to share with you the decisions that we've made about baptism. Many of us come from similar faith traditions with regards to baptism. Many of you have come from a faith tradition where infant baptism, for example, is what most people have done. What we want to have kind of an open dialogue and understanding with regards to baptism. So if you, some people say, well, I want my baby baptized. And someone else might say, no, I don't want my baby to be baptized. I want them to be dedicated and then for them to be baptized when they've accepted Jesus as their personal Lord and Savior. That's an open dialogue that we want you all to be having and praying about. So when it comes to baptism, if you've never been baptized before, you would come and you'd talk to your pastor about it, whether it's me or anybody else. You say, I want to be baptized, or I want my children to be baptized. And we'll talk about all the different possibilities and what that means for you and for your children. For example, infant baptism is not synonymous with salvation. A person must accept Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior for them to be saved. So what does that mean for infant baptism? Well, I'm not going to get into all that today, but that's the beginning of the process. So, and how we do baptisms, that's all open-ended too. We might go out to Kevin and Deb's pond, and I'll dunk you and hold you under for a long time if that's what you want to do. Or we can do sprinkling in church. You know, there's lots of different ways to do it, and we will work those things out as we talk. Lots of different ways. We can go to Mark's pool, right? Right, Mark? We could do that, sure. So, lots of different ways to do that. Again, the biggest thing that you need to understand about baptism is the theology behind it is that it is an outward and visible sign. It's something that we do to recognize what God is doing in us. So, baptism, I will let you know that the one kind of thing that we need because of that theology that we will hold to is that baptism is meant to be done in community, meaning together. I've had people in the past say, well, I'm kind of embarrassed to be baptized in front of a bunch of people. Could we just do it at my house or something like that? And usually, I understand where that's coming from, but we'll have a conversation about that. And by the time we have the conversation, they go, yeah, well, I get that. It might be a little embarrassing, but I want to do that because it is an outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace. Now, does that mean that there wouldn't be a time when a private baptism would be appropriate? Of course there might be times like that. And you can imagine what those times might be. So just know that grace and truth go together, right? Right. So, charter membership. Because we're hoping that we're going to have hundreds of people that want to join the church, we have kind of outlined a strategy for charter members. In other words, for people who want to be on that first group of people who say, yeah, this is what we're supposed to do. And this is kind of the process. If you'd fill out one of those information forms, and we want everybody to do that. We're going to have those available. If you haven't done that, please do so, whether you feel called to membership or not. Please fill one of those out. Right after Easter, I'm going to be preaching a sermon series which will be focusing on our core values and theologically what we believe as a church. So even if you can't be here, those will be available to you on the website, right? So everybody will have the opportunity to be taught what we believe as a church, what our core values are, what our theologies or understanding are about the fundamentals of the faith. So after that 6-week sermon series, on June 9th, we're going to have a celebration Sunday. And it's that day, anybody that wants to join Prairie Bible Church, to become a charter member, anybody that wants to be baptized, That's the day we're going to do this big thing, all right? We've talked about doing it at the barn. That sounds awesome. Maybe having a potluck afterwards. But that's the day we want to do this charter member. Basically, it's kind of like setting the charter of the church. And you all, or anybody that says, I want to be a charter member, that's the day we'll do it. Now, what happens if you already, like Mark found out, we were talking about this the other day, and Mark goes, oh, shoot, I'm going to be gone. So what if you want to be a charter member, but you know you can't be here on the 9th? That's okay. You can still be a charter member. And we will list you on that on the 9th. And then when you come back, the next Sunday you're back, or whenever you want to do it, we'll recognize you in church and just say, hey, we just want you to know that Mark and Tina have joined the church on the 9th when we had our Charter Sunday. But we're recognizing them today. Does that make sense? Okay. I just laid a whole bunch of stuff on you. So I'm going to stop right there and see if anybody has any questions or comments about membership criteria, baptism, or next steps. Anybody have any questions? Yes, ma'am. If you've already been baptized, you're good to go. Yep. So, yeah, you don't have to be rebaptized to join the church. Now, that's a really good question, though, Judy, because some people would say, what if I want to be rebaptized? Can I do that? And that's something we could talk about. What I would say to you, if you've done it once, you're good to go. But there might be something inside of your heart that is saying, that's something, maybe I'd like to do something. We can talk about that if that's something you want to do. So thank you, Judy. Any other comments or questions? Jeez, we are good, Mark.